We are working through those areas of security, and we spent 2 months thinking about being secure in God's love. We're now thinking about being secure in the good news that God has for us. And we are specifically talking about the age to come, what we mean in reality, or what the Bible means when in popular culture we talk about heaven. So when we talk about heaven, people have all these ideas about being on a cloud or becoming an angel or playing a harp, or the worst one that sometimes seems to rattle around in churches, the idea that we are destined for an eternal church service. And the people who find that exciting are not the sort of people you want to spend time with, because it's not good. So if you were in church, in an evangelical church in the 90s, talks like this would have gone through a chronology of Revelation. It would have been trying to kind of work out what this bit means and what that happened, and how the European Union was going to do this, and then the Antichrist was going to do that, and then how many 36 months that you were going to spend doing this. And all. We are not doing that at all. More, we're thinking about, because we were made for the age to come, we were made for perfection. What we're kind of doing is looking under the hood of what it means, what it is, what do we see inside us, and working out, oh, well, that's what we were designed for. And so we're thinking about what we were designed for as a way of understanding this great, amazing future God has for us, but also the living reality we have now because of what Jesus has done, that promise of the age to come is starting to break in through our lives because the Holy Spirit dwells inside us. So we are thinking about what do the things that we're looking at point towards this glorious future, but also what does it mean for us now? And I think this is important for us. It's good for us to understand this. So we will have experienced this, I think, in a couple of ways. So have you ever been feeling like life's a bit of a slog, and then you book a holiday you're really looking forward to, and suddenly you just have a bit more energy, a bit more excitement? I'm going with Till into Europe this summer. I have a map on next to my desk, and I just spend ages looking at that map thinking, I'm excited about that, and this is a great way to procrastinate from doing real work. So I do that. Or the other thing is, if you've watched a movie, and the kind of movie that's not like a modern movie where you don't really know what's going to happen, the movies that you know what's going to happen. So last night we watched the film Misbehaving. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on BBC iPlayer. It's about the protest at the 1970 Miss World competition. And so the movie is it's building to these points of tension where it looks like everything's going wrong and it's all bad. But as the viewer, I know what kind of movie this is. I know that this is going to have a good ending. I know that this is good. And actually, with the benefit of history, there's this bit where they've protested the 1970 Miss World competition and they're being arrested and charged with crimes. And now, 52 years later, looking back and you're like, this is great. This is a badge of honor to be arrested for this. We know history's on your side. And so, although they're trying to tell you the characters in the movie are in this point of stress, because we know the bigger story, as the viewers, we feel a sense of joy even in that moment. Enjoy being in prison. This is great because it's all going to go wonderful. You know, the hero goes into the cave where the dragon is, and we know it's the kind of film that the dragon's going to die and the hero's going to win and it's all going to be good. And we're like, that's fantastic. And I think theologically, our lives are more like that. That's how we should see our lives. Whatever hard stuff we're going through, it's all going to be good. And so we can almost find joy in those tough times. Now, I know that sounds hard, and I think you can say, oh, yeah, but you don't know, it's very easy for me to say that. I haven't had a very hard life. And so you can say, oh, well, you can say to find joy in the hard times. But the Bible tells us the glory that is awaiting us is so good that no hard time can outweigh anything of that glory. So even Jesus, who experienced the hardest time of anyone because God himself turned his face away from Jesus, it says this, because of the joy set before him, Jesus went to the cross. So all these things are totally overwhelmed by the glorious future that we have. And the Bible tells us to find joy in all circumstances. So even in the hard stuff, it's not the same as being happy, but there is a joy there if we can start to see things the way God sees. And actually, I think we do experience this a little way. Have you ever had to do something like public speaking or some kind of performance, and there's those nerves before you do it, and you have to go out and you do this thing, and it goes okay, and afterwards that feeling of joy because you've done it and it went okay, and that when you look back, you can think even that feeling of nervousness, the butterflies in my stomach, was part of the experience of being alive. It was part of the joy of being a human being. And so there's something about understanding, if we start to understand the great things God has planned for us, even in the hard times, we have access to joy. So we're going to look at these different aspects of being a human, these ideas of what's kind of under the hood, and what does that tell us. And so today we're going to talk about need. And I want to really affirm you now, because you as a human being are a bottomless abyss of need. I don't know if you've noticed this. We just have so many needs. In actual fact, humans, like a lot of animals, are born able to walk around, and do stuff and feed themselves. Human beings are not, we are rubbish when we are born. We are just completely little bundles, smelly bundles of need. So, not only do we need food and water and stuff, but Jesus said this. Jesus is quoting from the Old Testament. He's responding to the devil. The devil's trying to get him to turn stones into bread. And Jesus says, no, the scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So Jesus is saying we are not just physical beings that need sustenance. There is something else to make us truly alive, what life is. And so, we know the creation story, and our clues actually to what we find inside us and what they mean is we can look before the fall, the first 2 chapters of Genesis, and at the end of Revelations, the last 2 chapters of Revelations, they show us life without sin, what it was like and what it will be. And it says that, doesn't it? In the creation story, do you remember God made human beings out of material, out of dust, out of clay, whatever translation. But they're not alive until his spirit is breathed into them, which is this great picture for us now, post-Jesus, post-Pentecost, of his spirit being breathed into us to give us true life. So it's not just survival, it's what we need to feel alive. So if you think about a person and what makes someone feel alive, well, interestingly, it's not often, I don't think, it's not stuff that we need, it's other things that we access through stuff. So it's things like validation, nurture, security, status, affirmation, safety. All these things we need. And so we're kind of trying to find these. And we think it's a bad thing. It feels like culture tells us the aim is to become self-sufficient. But actually, of course, we need these things. That we use the word needy as a negative. If someone's a bit needy, it's like a negative. But actually, we are all incredibly needy. But what we tend to do is try and satisfy our needs in these areas through stuff. So we own certain things and we feel it gives us status, or we have a certain achievement that validates our existence. So all these things, we look to stuff to provide us with the things that we know we need to be alive. And it's, I know the theory of this is easy, I think we'd all agree with, but actually it goes so deep and it is so integrated and saturated into our living that it goes really deep into us. And so lots of things, if we are truly examining ourselves, we will see throughout the average day, we are looking to lots of other things to provide these for us. And it's really interesting as well now. So like social media, this thing for the last, 10 years, 15 years, that didn't exist before. We had no way to broadcast to people, generally, stuff about ourselves. And the whole way those platforms are set up are to feed back to us validation and status and affirmation. We may not be doing that for that, and we may know people who definitely do it for that, but that is a thing that is just built into the way it works. Or what they talk about, the quantification of life now, these ways that we measure everything. And I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole you've gone with things that tell you how much you've slept, how many steps you've walked. The first time I got a step counter on my phone, I would go somewhere without my phone and I'd think, oh, all those steps don't count. Why? I haven't done them because I can't quantify, I can't point towards this kind of affirmation, this validation of the things I've done. And what is interesting as well is when we are trying to find life through these things, what we tend to do then is see other people as competition, at some level. So we are seeing other people, well, they've got more status than me, that I want some of that status. I'm having to share it with that person. What they've done validates them more than it validates me. When we are living like this, it makes us really hard to love other people the way that God would have us love other people, because we are in competition with other people. So we are not free just to express love. We are trying to compete for what we need to feel alive. And then the more that we do those, what we move into is some kind of dependence on something, and then that moves into addiction on something as well. And then we can have all these problems about what we feel we need to be alive. And it's interesting, if you listen to that podcast I was recommending about God's love, the guy on there, Tim Keller, was talking about a quote from Plato. This is how intellectual we're getting, who said that human love is a child of poverty. And this idea that actually even the word love, sometimes we use, is actually a need thing, and that often the act of falling in love isn't an idea of love flowing out from us. It is a satisfaction of our own ego. We fall in love with people because of how they make us feel. They make us feel like we're special, like we're important, that we're valid, that they affirm us. And that kind of arouses all these feelings that we call love as well. So we are trying to find life through other created things to give meaning to our life. But that isn't the way that we were made. And so we were made to find love from God. So the idea is that we find our validation, nurture, security, status, affirmation, and safety from God. Not from the world around us, but from God. And then because we are having our life come from God, we are then able to give out to the world around us. We are not trying to take from the world around us. Although I should say, and I skipped this in my notes, taking from the world around us isn't bad. People do things that express life to us. What we have to do is just receive them with thankfulness. We know that it's from God through that person. That's where the origin of saying grace before a meal. This food is going to sustain me, but I'm saying thank you because I'm acknowledging that God caused the crops to grow and and whatever and the stuff like that. But if we are always seeing the provision of God, whether it comes through stuff around us or directly from him, that's good. So there is no need. So if we're going to think about what does this mean, really, because I think this is kind of really easy to understand theory, but when we try and work it into our life, it's a bit differently. So let's talk about the age to come as we think, what is life going to be like in eternity when God remakes the world and makes the whole universe perfect, and then we get to live in it and live this life with God that is a full physical life of relationships and activity and work and all those things. What will happen? Well, there is no need. So Jesus says, to all who are thirsty, I will give freely from the springs of the water of life. It's picture language to say that life is going to come to us. It's not just talking about it's not like when you get the bottomless Coke at Pizza Hut. It's more than that. And then Revelations talks about a tree that has a crop every month. There's it's again talking about this abundance provision. So in the age to come, we will get to enjoy other people for who they are and the beauty they are and how they reflect God, not for what they can do for us, not what we get from them. We can enjoy things for their inherent beauty. So the idea, so sometimes as well, people think that the age to come is like retirement. You know, we'll sit around a pool, drink cocktails. Maybe feels a little bit better than the eternal church service. Although I've done 10 days at an all-inclusive resort, and actually the idea of just sitting around a pool, give it everything available for you, would become like hell. It can be awful as well. Actually, we are made to work, so we will do work in the age to come. We will have meaningful activity. But what's interesting, it's part of the curse, the broken universe, that work is hard, that it is not efficient. You know, you don't get out what you put into it, that you struggle and toil. So in the age to come, we will, you know, in the evening, you will lie down thinking, I've done some great stuff today, and it's gone really well, and everything's come together, and I've done something meaningful, and we will have like just the most enjoyable, relaxing time sleep because we have a meaningful thing to do. So even our activity is not, we're not trying to get something out of it. We're not like, oh, I'm trying to build my status, advance my career, I'm trying to achieve things so I can feel valid. We will just, that's already there for us. I have a inclination towards gluttony. Okay, like Pizza Hut buffet is not a good place for me to find myself. So I don't know if you've read C.S. Lewis's Cosmic Trilogy. So the second one, Perilanda, is kind of set on this planet as if the fall had never happened. And he describes, the main character, there's this tree full of fruit, and he eats one of the fruit, and he describes how beautiful it is and how tasty, and it, you know, it's hitting all these flavors he's never experienced before, and it's just so wonderful. But there's something about the beauty of it that satisfies that he doesn't want to take another one. And I remember reading that, and I'm like, I just cannot imagine something being good that I do not then just want to gorge myself on. But this idea of, you know, there's not abyss of need in us because the needs are being met. So the other thing to think about in the age to come is we are not going to be people who are driven by need. You know, how much of our lives now are driven by a need we have or a fear of a need not being met? I won't ask you to put your hands up, but imagine in this room, who has financial worries at the moment? Who has a relationship where you feel that there is some mismatch going on and you are not getting from that what you want, need, or desire? Who has anxiety around performance or status or something that you should be doing, or some anxiety about what other people think of you? All these things are part of our broken selves trying to find life from the world around us. We won't have any of that. We will have a free life of joyous existence. It's just going to be fantastic. So that is what we're looking forward to. So every time you go through your life and you think, you can feel there's this need calling at you, calling to direct or control your life, calling to have influence in you, in the age to come, that won't even exist because we will just be free of all those things. So that's what we look forward to the age to come. But we now, in this age, we are kingdom people, which means the age to come in the Holy Spirit is within us and wants to break out. So what does that mean for us now? And it says in Philippians 4:19, I think I might have got my slides out of order. It says, God will supply all your needs from his glorious riches, which have been given to us in Christ Jesus. God has inexhaustible, glorious riches that he is offering to us because of what Jesus has done. God pours into us. And so that's the thing with the models. Ivy, is your model you've made, has it come to life yet? Is it alive? No. So you see, no matter how good, and you can imagine in the Garden of Eden, God was probably a pretty good sculptor. He probably made a very good model. But the life comes from God's Spirit being breathed into us, energized to us. So I want to talk about how does this really work for us in now, here and now, in this age. And so there are two things, faith and fruit, that I think might help us process our everyday life in this context. Faith is to trust that God has given us the resources, he's promised them to us, and we can trust that he will do that. And fruit is that process of allowing things to grow in God's time. So faith. So faith is that trusting that we can give out without feeling like I've run out of resources, so now I need to switch and I need to take from people around me, or from things around me. Or, who does the thing at the end of the day and you're like, I really deserve a glass of this or that, or I'm not going to engage with this thing because I'm just going to watch some escapist TV or, whatever. And those things, that principle can go darker and darker. But for us, faith is to trust that God has given us everything we need to do the things he's asking us to do, even if we don't feel like it. So have you ever noticed with exercise that often you can do more than you think you can do? So there's a bit in your head and you're thinking, I've run out, but there's more resources than you realise. I've noticed this. If I run on a treadmill, I can get to a kilometre. And I'm like, I've got to stop. I just can't go any further. If you go out road running and you run a kilometre, you can run back because you can't just get off and walk away. So it's that idea of how I have an escape out of this. If you do exercise with other people, often you do more than you do on your own because you can't give yourself that excuse. And so often in our lives, when we feel I've run out of resources, the problem isn't that God isn't supplying. The problem is we've given us an excuse to step out. Have you ever done this? When you do something thoughtful for somebody else, you're like, I'm going to do this nice thing for someone. You do it, and then they don't appreciate it as much as you think they should. You've done all this thing, and they kind of brush it off, or it's not quite right, and they comment on the thing that's not quite right. And then often, I will then switch into being belligerently angry about how dare they do this thing, which is kind of weird if you think, because when you start out, you're thinking, I want to do something nice for this person. I want to give some, gesture of love to this person. And then, because it's not received in the right way, I'm now giving a gesture of hatred instead. But then you kind of examine, you think, well, actually, was I really giving? Was I giving? Was I thinking about this person? Or was I thinking about, I want to do this because I know I will get something, some affirmation, validity, security back from that. And so I think that's a really interesting situation we often find ourselves in, where we then can go, well, I'm going to get my affirmation, my security, my validation from God. It's a shame that this hasn't worked out. But, we go back to God for the resources, not looking for it to come back to us. And so to give and not concern what you get back is a real way of trusting that God gives to us. Because that is how God gives to us, doesn't it? Can you think of the immense number of good things in our lives that we haven't said thank you to God for? Imagine God only gave us the stuff we were thankful for. Who has got up this morning and said, God, I'm so thank you for the constancy of scientific principles such as gravity. God, I thank you gravity is working today. We don't do that. Well, we might do if anyone who doesn't do that starts floating around. But anyway. So we need to trust that God gives us resources beyond what we feel or think, and examine ourselves when we think, I've switched out of giving into taking now. And then the fruit is it takes time. So we need faith, we need to trust, and fruit. Fruit takes time to grow and develop. We often want instant responses. We want to do something and then see something come back, some positive come back to us. So one way I think is really helpful of understanding what it means to have the age to come in us is the fruit of the Holy Spirit. Patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, and the other ones, love and joy, peace. So all those things, they develop in us. So if you want to be patient, you can't expect the first time to be patient. We need to grow these things in us. And so these things take time. And especially because we're talking about love, which is a relational thing, relationships take time. They require investments. And that's why if you're in a hub, hubs take time to invest yourself into, to give in, to see the fruit grow from that. So the aim for this is for us to be secure and know that God gives us resources to live our life. For us to be able to be those loving people. If you often think, what's the difference between me and just somebody else who doesn't know God? And sometimes that can be quite a scary thing to think about, you know, like what is the difference between me and my next door neighbour? And when I was first started going to church, the thing was always Christians are nicer than other people. You know, that's what we were told, you know, like people outside the church are just actually not very nice and they do all these things. And so if you're really nice, and that was kind of fine until I lived in London and I had a housemate who wasn't a Christian and was a nicer person than me, like quite significantly nicer person. And I was like, what? That's my unique selling point. That is how I'm a Christian, and you're nicer than me. Well, I think the difference is our ability to give love. And that can only come when we are resourced from God. So this aim is for us to learn to trust God and wait on him for the resources to give. And this is in the most practical ways. It's smiling, being nice, being kind, all those things, as well as supernatural ways. So we're going to sing another song, and then we're going to try a spiritual practice. Actually, I think we might just combine these, because I didn't realise what the time was.